Welcome into another edition of the Behind the Rails of Purdue Football Podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Vance. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether it's live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. If you're watching on any of those platforms, feel free to give out your comments, questions, concerns. I'll see them here in the feed, and we'll address those questions if you do have them. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or you can follow the show on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell to get alerts when we do go live or when another podcast has been posted. Thank you so much for tuning in here, guys. You can give me a follow on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok if you want to see shorts of the show, shorter clips. So tune in and let's talk about the opening game here, the of Big Ten play, the loss to Wisconsin 38-17. So it felt like a similar story to last week, and it played out a lot in similar fashion. You had the inability to get off the field on third down. You had the turnovers, especially in the second half, that seemed to eat you alive and kill any momentum that you maybe tried to have. You dug yourself an early hole like you did against Syracuse, and you had to deal with the quarterback that used his mobility, and you struggled to slow him down, especially in that first half. They did a whole lot better job of slowing down Tanner Mordecai in that second half when he tried to take off and run. They did a better job of corralling him and were able to not allow him to go off and have any big, huge runs that he did in the first half, the ones that were especially impactful. So it was a better dynamic to see from that defense in that second half. And that defense did step up in the second half after allowing three straight touchdown drives to start the game. They forced a punt on their fourth drive, but I'm I'm not as down as I was last week after the Syracuse game, just because that was just horrible luck, and it never felt like Purdue had a chance to really get back in that game, and that there wasn't really a lot of hope or a real chance that I thought Purdue was going to be back in this game. Um, for so it was an opportunity for Purdue to give themselves a chance, and I don't know that they necessarily were ever going to fully complete the comeback. There was a little bit of hope, after they got it within, 9 points. But I really don't think that there was, after they dug themselves into that hole, there really wasn't a good um, momentum shift. It always seemed to get stopped by turnovers, or it seemed to be, a spot where Purdue couldn't convert, or an oddly turnover or a penalty. And I know a lot of people are upset about the refs tonight, especially defensive pass interference. I'm with you on a lot of those calls, but I think that, especially on that Hail Mary to end the first half, I think that one should have been called. I just don't necessarily think the ref is going to call it in that situation, just because it's a Hail Mary throw. But I mean, when you see Purdue receivers just getting dragged and pulled down to the ground and shoved down to the ground, you're like, what? How can you not call it? And I'm right there with you guys. And I think that this game got off to a bad start. I think that they dug themselves into a hole, and you got flashbacks to a week ago when Garrett Schrader torched the defense on the ground. You had Tanner Mordecai running at will. And how in the world is this defense going to stop a mobile quarterback who actually can move a whole lot better than Tanner Mordecai? Because if they face a quarterback like Jeff Sims who can run, now I don't know if he'll necessarily start, but if you're Nebraska, why wouldn't you put him out there and let him run? Because this Purdue defense has shown the inability to slow down a running quarterback or at least contain him. But like I said, they did do a better job in that second half of doing it, and Mordecai wasn't really able to get loose on some of those runs. But you got flashbacks early on to a week ago, and you're thinking, here we go again. This is a defense that really struggled to get going in that first half. They struggled to find any chance or combination of defensive pressure up front, or the ability to stop the run. They couldn't do anything with that front seven. And I was hopeful that they would be super dominant or have the ability to be able to slow down Wisconsin. But I thought that there was a chance that they could compete and at least slow down the rushing attack a little bit. I don't necessarily think that they did a good job in that first half whatsoever. Malusi and Allen and Mordecai were able to run all over that defense. Tanner Mordecai and Hudson Card didn't really have all that much to say through the air tonight. I thought both secondaries played well, but I don't know if there was anything that Purdue did particularly well in that first half on either side of the ball. I thought they moved the ball well towards the end of the first half, but it ends with an interception in the end zone. But the penalties early on really killed any drive that they had. I think their first 3 drives, Fox Sports 1, FS1 put up a graphic that their average down in distance, or their average distance on third down on the first 3 attempts was 18 yards. So penalties really killed this team in that first half on those first drives. And then that second drive that that Wisconsin had took like 8 minutes off the clock. And there was nothing that Purdue could stop Wisconsin on third down. I mean, it was horrendous. I think they converted on their first 8 third downs. They finally got a stop late in that second quarter and forced a punt, which allowed Purdue to attempt a drive at the end of the first half. But I was really concerned in that first half that this was going to be a 30 point blowout. Ended up being a 21-point win for Wisconsin, but I was super concerned that this game was going to get out of hand and we were going to have nothing to say here on this recap that was going to be any positive. But I thought that the offensive line for Wisconsin was dominant early. They weren't as dominant in that second half, but they kept moving the ball for Wisconsin and getting them into field goal range at least. I think their first 2 drives of that second half got inside the 5, but penalties and lack of execution forced 2 field goals. So that allowed Purdue to come back and get into this game, and they found some rhythm offensively in that second half, which was really nice to see because I didn't see a whole lot of rhythm from Hudson Card early on. I didn't see them trying to establish the running game whatsoever, and it feels like that they finally got there. They finally got to a point where They were able to run the ball effectively with Tyrone Tracy Jr. And I think that this Purdue offensive line is most effective, and we can see this when they're kind of doing a zone blocking kind of scheme where they're kind of moving the offensive line one way or the other, to the left or the right, not really going straight at the defense. That's when you give guys like Maccabee and Tracy Jr. to find those cutback lanes and make those gains that are, maybe 1 to 2 yards, and turn them into 7 or 8 or even 10. And I think that's what this offense is going to have to do going forward if they want to establish any type of run game, or have Hudson Card run the ball a handful of times on some of those runs. And some of those runs, I think, were design runs, and they picked up plays. But that offensive line looked out of sorts early on. I didn't necessarily think Wisconsin was doing a ton of blitzing. They were even getting after Card with 4 guys a lot of the time. And I thought that this was a first half that the offensive line really struggled to protect Card and run the ball efficiently. There was not a ton that that the offensive line did well in that first half. They did a whole lot better, I think, in the second half, especially when they were running towards the edges or trying to get outside of the tackle box, running the ball. They did a decent job protecting Card in that second half, and allowing him to throw the ball deeper downfield. But Hudson Card, made some errors. That first interception that he threw was I know what he was trying to do, but the defensive back came off the route that he was covering and made a nice play on the interception. He just didn't see the corner or the safety running with the other wide receiver, and by that, when he threw it, I mean, it just made a great play on the ball to come back and intercept that. And it really gave this Purdue team some juice. It gave them some momentum when they were able to move the ball and score. I just think that this offense needs to play with a little bit more pace, and try to move the ball downfield a little bit quicker. It feels like that once they establish something, they don't go back to it, because I think they gained like 2 or 3 first downs running the ball, and then the next play abandon it and go a couple straight passes, and then a play that gets stuck or stuffed in the backfield running the ball. And we even saw that they got down near the goal line and they tried to run the ball up the middle and it got stuffed. So they ended up drawing up a pass play, and Hudson Card has to do some magic and find the corner of the end zone. So I'm I'm trying to take some of the positives out, and I think those are some of the positives that this team competed for 4 quarters. I thought they moved the ball well offensively. They weren't outgained by that much. I think they finished with just under 400 yards of total offense. Yeah, 396. They ran the ball for almost 200, which is an encouraging sign for this offense, and something that I didn't expect to see. So I'll be honest with you. I didn't think that this offense was going to run the ball for 200 yards, especially how it started. I thought that they were going to get jammed up and be stuffed all day long, but credit to the offensive line for stepping up. But man, you got to eliminate the slow starts. This is back-to-back weeks now where you fall in a hole and you're playing from behind, so you're maybe not in your typical game plan. And against a team like Illinois and Iowa the next 2 weeks, those defenses are just as good, maybe even better than Wisconsin's. And if you get into a hole early, you fall behind a couple of scores like you did tonight, it's going to be the same story where you're scratching and clawing. Yes, you might be able to move the ball, but you got to learn how to finish drives. And they really didn't do that early on, where Wisconsin was able to get down the field and finish drives, put it in the end zone. And I think that Purdue needs to find a way to start better, start early, because I think they did that well in the first 2 weeks. And these last couple of weeks, where the competition, I think, has raised a level with Syracuse and Wisconsin, they really haven't come out of the gates firing on all cylinders and looking like the team that they did in the first 2 weeks of the season. They come off to a slow start. They are scratching and clawing. They are struggling to find their identity and what to do going forward in certain things offensively, and they can't get a stop on third down, and things just start to unravel quickly. And credit this team, they kind of bundled it up there a little bit. They buttoned it up and were able to make this game interesting, at least when it was 27-17, 28-17, something like that. um, I thought that that was where this team, if you can try to find that third quarter and play it over 4 quarters, I mean, that's the coach speak there. I mean, I felt troubled myself into it. We got to find a way to bottle this up and turn it into 4 quarters. Yeah, but I mean, it's true. You can't just play good for 1 quarter. I think Purdue has really not played a full 4 quarters of quality football. You look at the game against Virginia Tech; they had a bad second quarter and allowed the Hokies to get back in that game and tie it up. Now they played a whole lot better in that second half. Still took the offense a while to get going in that game, but for this game, for this team, you cannot start from behind the 8 ball, especially with the defenses that they're going to face the rest of the season. Wisconsin's defense, I thought it was a little porous. And, there were some opportunities for Purdue to go down the field, um, outside of some penalties that weren't called. I think some of those passes get completed. There was, I think, more deep shots. Now, granted, they were late in the game, and does it really matter at that point? But and that's also a combination of, you have to protect Hudson Card and allow him to sit back there and dissect the defense, and he really didn't have that in the first half. Or I, th- you think that maybe there would be more opportunities for deep shots, but it's still a lot of intermediate underneath stuff. And I think that if you can just give him a couple of seconds, he can step into a couple of throws and not be throwing on the run or running for his life, and and be able to be effective and take this offense to another level, because I still don't think they've hit that gear yet where bigger plays are happening at a more consistent clip. Because and that could do with the offensive line, the not giving him time. Sometimes it's the play calling. It just feels like this offense finally got in a rhythm in that third quarter, and then you have turnovers, and then you have penalties. They can't get out of their own way. That's been Purdue's biggest problem here these last couple of weeks, is just getting in their own way, because they've made these games competitive, although from behind. But were there ever really chances, realistic chances, that you thought Purdue's going to win this game? I don't think I have felt that in the last 2 weeks. I didn't feel it in the Virginia Tech game. I wasn't that confident, because you thought Virginia Tech was going to go down and score on that last drive and force overtime, and they nearly did. Uh, the way that the team played in that first game against Fresno State, you never thought that it was going to be a situation where you're like, "Yep, we got this." We haven't felt that yet, and I don't know when we're going to feel that. I really think that we're at a point where not press the panic button, but I think your fingers should be on it because you're getting behind in games, you're turning it over, can't get off the field, and you're just allowing these big chunk plays from the opposing quarterback, whether it's through the air or on the ground. And something's got to change. And I don't know if it will this year for Purdue because I think it's still going to take some time for Ryan Walters to get his guys in here. And that's where I'm even looking at, you know, the 2024 recruiting rankings and thinking, okay, Purdue's got a nice class coming in next year, but still, those guys that they even recruit now, you may have one or two guys, maybe a third that see the field next year. I think this is a team that, might dive into the transfer portal a little bit more to try and find some higher quality guys because I don't know if what you found so far has been all that effective. Even Hudson Card, he's had his moments, but still, consistently, he hasn't been there. And I get it. There was a lot of hype coming in to this season with, hey, we're going to have an air raid style. We're going to have a quarterback that has a really good arm, mobile guy. We like the weapons. We have a all Big Ten caliber running back coming back. We thought, hey, it's all there. Can they put it together? The offensive line brought back some guys as well. Can we put this all together and go out there and score a ton of points? In my mind, the offense hasn't scored more than 30 points because I know they scored 35 in the opening weekend against Fresno State, but you got to remember the kickoff by Tracy was taken back. So the offense has scored 28 points. And I think even in that game, they were given a short field after an interception by Cam Allen. So the offense really hasn't found that gear yet. And I think the problem is the offensive line. They haven't given Card time to throw. They haven't been consistent enough in the run game. I think they maybe have found something here with this game with almost rushing for 200 yards. And I think you may have found something with Tracy Jr. My prediction that Maccabee is going to run for 1,200 yards this year is all but gone, unless he really starts to break off some big games here, which I'm not as hopeful on, just because he's not getting on the field, and we're starting to see more of a rotation. We saw more Dylan Downing this week, and I get it. Maccabee has struggled holding on to the football for the last week, big time. And I guess the fumble on him this past week is on him, even though I think he thought the play was dead, but I think the fumble was credited to him after the hit on Card was ruled a fumble, and then the ball gets to Maccabee, and I think it was Maccabee that the fumble was given credited to whoever the running back was, and if it was Maccabee, I mean that's unfortunate. I had to go back and look at it. I was busy, had my attention away from the screen at that moment, and I know the play was reviewed for a long time, but I had my attention elsewhere when we finally got back to gameplay. But I do want to leave you guys with some positives. I think this receiving core is still pretty good. I think it's getting better as well. I think Deion Burks was able to get more involved in the offense. Yassine continues to be Mr. Consistency. I think we might have, and I don't want to just take a one game sample and say, yes, we found something and then this is going to work. I don't even like doing that drive to drive, saying, hey, Purdue found something here. Let's go do this and continue to do it, because teams are going to scheme against it. But I think that you may have found something with that running game, with how they blocked those runs and allowing guys to get cutback lanes. And if you can have a guy like Tyrone Tracy Jr. and you can involve Maccabee in that as well, both those guys had the capability to stick their foot in the ground, make that one cut, and go upfield. And I'm hopeful that they found something there, because if you're traditionally going to just run straight ahead, this offensive line has not been able to show me that they are capable of being a unit that pushes teams back a couple of yards and will gain yardage that way on the ground. It's more of a, here, we're going to turn you and create those lanes for guys to run in. So they got to improve pass blocking wise as well. I thought coverage wise, guys did a lot better than maybe I anticipated, with Marquise Wilson making some plays. We had an interception by Botros Alessandro. I was just waiting for him to make a play, because a lot of the times he's been coming up and trying to jump some of those routes, those comeback routes, or those quick outs, or those quick digs. He's been trying to cut those off for all season, and he's been close a number of times, or he's just mistimed it. And I think it was only a matter of time before he was going to get one. And even there, they met at the same time. The receiver and Botros Alessandro got the ball at the same time, but Alessandro just ripped the ball out of his hands and started going the other way. Credit to him. So I think, those guys did better than what I expected. Tanner Mordecai didn't really go off and have a ton of passing yards, and he really didn't need to. So they weren't really tested, I don't think, to the fullest extent of what the Wisconsin offense is trying to do. But I thought they played better than I expected. Defensive front showed up when needed to in that second half, made some adjustments in containing Tanner Mordecai, didn't allow so many big runs. I mean, I know they allowed the 150-yarder by Allen, but other than that, didn't allow too many big running plays, and kept them in check. I know they still rushed for over 200 yards, but that's how Wisconsin, I think, is still going to try to beat teams at this moment. So I think that wraps it up here on the recap show of this edition of Behind the Rails. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether it was live on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. If you want to catch the podcast version, you can still do that as well. And the video version will be up on YouTube as well. We'll have a preview show for the game next week, and trying to get some other things in the works as well. Try to get on a guest or two to figure out what this Big Ten West is after we are a third of the way through the season, and try to get somebody's outside perspective on what they think of Purdue at 4 games in, and if they see a path for Purdue to find its way to bowl eligibility, being competitive at the very least. We'll have to see. And we'll be efforting those guests for you guys to get here on the podcast. But until then, thank you so much again for tuning in to Behind the Rails of Purdue Football. I've been your host, Bryce Vance. I'll see you guys next week.